Welcome to the Belly Button Window channel and episode 21, part 2 of the Jimi Hendrix story, like you've never heard it before. In this episode, we conclude the deep dive into April 1968, including the various club jam sessions and the recording of the Electric Ladyland album. Please remember to check the channel's community tab and video information page, where you will find links to related videos, performances, and stunning photographs from the period. Saturday the 6th of April, and the group performs at the Westchester Country Center, White Plains, New York. On the same day, the Jimi Hendrix Experience is featured in the following music magazines and newspapers: Fabulous 208, The Virginian Pilot, with an article titled Music Comes First for Jimi Hendrix, Rolling Stone, I Magazine, and Go Girl. In the I Magazine interview, Jimi expressed his love of jamming as follows: "Any chance we have, we jam. That's what playing is all about. When you're creating music with other musicians, that's what you live for. You can't express yourself by jabbering and talking all the time, and half the people don't know how to jam nowadays. They don't play together. They don't really think about the other person. That's what jamming is about. It's playing with everybody. We have a certain little crowd which is great. We'd like to bring in other jammers, but then, after playing a while, you feel the flow that goes through the music, and you can follow each other. And finally, you get to where, jamming, you can be more together than on a record you might have worked on for 2 weeks. Like changes of key and timing and breaks and licks, it can be one of the most beautiful things if you have time to hit it." Jimi started using the 1956 Gibson Les Paul custom guitar around April 1968. The earliest photos date to April 5th and the Symphony Hall performance, which could possibly mean that this is something Jimi acquired at Manny's Music Shop, which is just a 30-minute drive from the New Jersey venue. At that time, the guitar seemed to have been used exclusively on the song Red House, and it seemed to have some sort of white sticker on the top of the body. The Les Paul was, however, most famously used at Bill Graham's Fillmore East venue in New York on May 10, 1968, and at the Miami Pop Festival on May 18th. Aside from these two performances, Hendrix apparently hadn't really played the guitar that much, since it was spotted during only a handful of gigs around this period. Sunday, the 7th of April, and New York City Mayor John Lindsay, following the brutal murder of Dr. Martin Luther King in Memphis, and after being nearly mobbed in Harlem, bans all public performances. Due to the ban, Jimi had to cancel the planned concert in Troy, New York. Eventually, the gig is rescheduled, and he played at the Troy Armory a few weeks later on April 19th. Also on the 7th, the Generation Club of New York organizes its official opening party for the press, friends and family. The planned program begins with a performance by B.B. King, followed by Janis Joplin with Big Brother and the Holding Company. After a brief break, a jam session is organized in tribute to Martin Luther King. The jam features Jimi Hendrix on guitar, Hugh McCracken on guitar plus 2 drummers, possible Sonny Freeman, B.B. King, Herb Lavelle, B.B. King, or Fred Below, Buddy Guy. The B.B. King jam session consisted of guitar, B.B. King, guitar, Elvin Bishop, vocals, harmonica, Paul Butterfield, drums, Sonny Freeman, organ, James Toney. Jimi records part of the night's performances on his tape recorders. On the recorded box he notes, Joni Mitchell, Buddy Guy, Bugs, me and a guitarist friend, B.B. King, Elvin Bishop, Paul Butterfield, Richie Havens and friends. Sunday, the 7th of April. At the Generation Club, New York City, Jimi attends a Buddy Guy concert and later jams with Roy Buchanan. Over the rest of the month, numerous jam sessions took place with a constantly changing army of musicians. In the years since, many musicians have spoken about the jam sessions in interviews, each with a different story and with different participants. Monday the 8th of April, at the Generation Club, New York City, Jimi attends a second Buddy Guy concert and jams with the blues guitarist. The American documentary filmmaker D.A. Pennebaker, known for his Monterey Pop Festival film, was also present and filmed some of the evening and captures the performances that he would later put into a film called Wake, a Generation. Apparently, Steve Miller and members of Blood, Sweat and Tears were also there that night. Tuesday, the 9th of April at the Generation Club, Jimi jams with B.B. King, Al Kooper, Paul Butterfield and Elvin Bishop among others. Hendrix, B.B. King and Buddy Guy, at the end of a night of blues, raise funds for Martin Luther King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Hendrix, who had always refused to participate in social and political initiatives, personally donated $5,000. Wednesday, the 10th of April, McGough and McGear release an album in England with Jimi Hendrix, appearing on the titles So Much and Ex-Art Student. Friday, the 12th of April, and the Jimi Hendrix Experience is featured in the following music magazines and newspapers: Kaleidoscope. Then on Saturday, the 13th of April, and the Jimi Hendrix Experience is interviewed by Beat Instrumental magazine. On the same day, the Jimi Hendrix Experience is featured in the following music magazines and newspapers: Melody Maker in an article announcing that Hendrix has been booked to tour Germany. Record Mirror, featured in the Smash Hits review section. New Musical Express in an article titled Hendrix Association Dolls Pole Concert, and Disc Music Echo in an article titled For Sheer Excitement, Hendrix Cannot Be Beaten. Sunday, April 14th, at the Generation Club, and a tribute concert to Martin Luther King, according to photographer Sonny Paul. I am sure without a doubt that it was not Sunday evening because I had to go home, and I would not have stayed. We saw him a few days earlier. It was Friday, April 12th, 1968. Jimi participates in a jam session with Elvin Bishop, guitar, John Martin, guitar, Buzzy Phaeton, bass, Philip Wilson, drums, Al Kooper, organ, Paul Butterfield, harmonica, and Stuart Somebody piano, B.B. King, guitar, Don Martin, guitar, Paul Butterfield, harmonica and piano. The jam is recorded by Jimi, and later that night Jimi participates in a jam session with Ted Nugent, B.B. King, Al Kooper and others. At one point, B.B. King took the floor to introduce the musicians and is recorded saying, "Jimi Hendrix, you're a whore." Apparently Elvin Bishop was also there but was intoxicated and really couldn't play and bowed out. Monday, the 15th of April, at the United States Court of Appeals, 40 Center Street, New York City. As a result of the complaint filed on December 14th, 1967 by Mike Jeffrey against Decca Records in relation to the release of the Hush Now record by Curtis Knight, Jimi, Chaz and Michael Jeffrey are required to appear at the United States Court of Appeals. The court decides that day that the case is ordered to be remanded to the Chief Judge of the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Warner executives try to buy out Ed Chalpin of PPX Enterprises, Inc. According to Chalpin, "They offered me $70,000 to buy me out. My lawyer insisted I take it. I said no. They were stealing my artist. I was the producer, and the original sound was mine." While later that evening, Jimi sees B.B. King at the Generation Club and jams with him and Elvin Bishop, Paul Butterfield and Al Kooper. Wednesday, the 17th of April, at CAFÉ A Go-Go, New York, Jimi participates in a jam session with Elvin Bishop on guitar, Harvey Brooks on bass, Philip Wilson drums, Buddy Miles drums, James Tatum sax, Herbie Rich organ, and Paul Butterfield on harmonica. The jam is recorded by Jimi, with the setlist for the evening as follows: Everything's Gonna Be Alright, Stormy Monday, Three Little Bears, Instrumental Jam 1 and 2, Little Wing, and Cream's Crossroads. While earlier in the day, the Jimi Hendrix Experience is interviewed for Life magazine. Thursday, the 18th of April, sees the group at the record plant. The first of the Electric Ladyland tracks started at the record plant was Long Hot Summer Night. Unlike the solo Hendrix demos cut at Olympic, this version, engineered by Gary Kellgren, featured a contribution from Al Kooper on piano, in addition to Mitchell and Redding. While Hendrix would return to overdub and remix the song, the basic track was produced by Chaz Chandler and completed on April 18th. Let's take a deeper look at the Electric Ladyland recording sessions. Jimi compared his albums to personal diaries and would scribble down lyrics about psychedelic things like spaceships on pads, napkins, or any surface available. While, in the studio, he would record multiple takes of each part, and this painstaking attention to detail resulting in further estrangement from Noel, and more seriously, before long, a split with Chaz Chandler. Now Hendrix was holding the reins, and Electric Ladyland was the first and only studio album to be produced and directed by Jimi himself. He was looking to use additional musicians and explore new musical vistas. Most of Electric Ladyland was recorded in the record plant, engineered in part by owner Gary Kellgren, and mostly by engineer Eddie Kramer. At the time, New York City's The Record Plant was a brand new 12-track studio and was a mighty jump from London's Olympic Studios' 4-track equipment, where a few of the songs were initially mapped out. The studio's modern technology would become a key ingredient in the experimental nature of the resulting album. The guest musicians would also help adjust the flavor of the music. As a result, however, tensions between Hendrix and bass player Noel were running high, as Redding was getting tired of the inordinate amount of time being spent in the studio and sometimes preferred not to attend at all, choosing to head to a nearby pub. Sometimes Hendrix would play bass himself, but he also welcomed guests such as drummer Buddy Miles of the Electric Flag, Traffic's Dave Mason, Chris Wood and Steve Winwood, former Dylan organist Al Kooper and Jefferson Airplane bassist Jack Cassidy, amongst others in the mix. In terms of the recording, however, Hendrix had a clear idea of what he wanted, and with the studio's modern technologies, the engineers were able to realize his vision by pushing the technological envelope to its limits and trying new ideas. According to Eddie Kramer, "In the moment we didn't give a damn about convention or anything. We just did it, and tape was running most of the time." They used echo, flanging, phasing, unconventional microphone placements, and even ran the tape backwards. This heavy dose of sonic experimentation created a varied textural soundscape that complemented Hendrix's lead. The musicians also pushed boundaries stylistically, as the finished album was a unique blend of blues, rock, pop, funk, and in response to the cultural zeitgeist of the moment, psychedelia. Friday, the 19th of April, sees the Experience perform at the Troy Armory, Troy, New York. Also, the 19th saw the English release of the Smash Hits LP, featuring the following songs, most of which were released as singles in Britain: Purple Haze, Fire, The Wind Cries Mary, Can You See Me, 51st Anniversary, Hey Joe, Stone Free, The Stars That Play with Laughing Sam's Dice, Manic Depression, Highway Child, The Burning of the Midnight Lamp, and Foxy Lady. Also, on the same day, the Jimi Hendrix Experience is featured in The East Village Other newspaper. Saturday, the 20th of April, at the Record Plant, and Noel is alone in the studio, recording Little Miss Strange. On the same day, the Jimi Hendrix Experience is featured in the following music magazines and newspapers: New Musical Express, in an article titled "Jimi Has SRO Experience in US." Melody Maker, in an article titled "Let's Face It, America is Where the Big Money Is," and the underground publication The Seed. Sunday, the 21st of April, and the group is back at the Record Plant, recording Gypsy Eyes, Little Miss Strange, and Three Little Bears. According to Hendrix author John McDermott, on April 20th and 21, Noel Redding finished taping the basic tracks for Little Miss Strange. It is a tune he had composed some while before, biding his time for the chance to record it. In the past, Hendrix had made a point of contributing to Redding's songs, even at the demo stages. However, at the Record Plant, matters were far less structured. Even though time had been booked, Jimi did not appear, and with Chandler otherwise engaged, Redding turned to Eddie Kramer for production help. With Mitchell on drums, a test session, as the box marked, was undertaken. Redding would tinker with the track again on April 29th, this time with Chandler and Hendrix in attendance, and a final remix was completed on May 5th, ensuring Noel a spot on the projected double album. Monday, the 22nd of April, at the Record Plant, recording 5 takes from 1983 and Gypsy Eyes. Hendrix first recorded a private demo of 1983, A Merman I Should Turn to Be, in a New York apartment in March of 1968, and the first Experience recording of the song took place at New York Sound Center Studios on March 13th. On April 22nd, the backing track was completed at the Record Plant, with Hendrix, Mitch Mitchell on drums and Chris Wood, then a member of Traffic, on flute. Additional overdubs were added on May 8th, and the song was completed and mixed at the Record Plant on June 10th. For the released version, Hendrix plays all guitars, vocals, percussion and bass. Noel Redding was absent from the track, with Mitchell on drums and Wood on flute. The track also features backwards guitar and flute parts, the sounds of seagulls produced by manipulating microphone feedback, and a flexitone that makes a ringing bell sound. By this time, Chaz Chandler had stepped down as Hendrix's producer. Instead, production was led by Hendrix, while the engineering was handled by Eddie Kramer and studio owner Gary Kellgren. Tuesday, April 23rd, 1968, Record Plant Studios, Recording, 1983. Then, Wednesday the 24th of April at Record Plant, recording Little Miss Strange and Gypsy Eyes. In a review for All Music, Matthew Greenwald calls Gypsy Eyes a great slice of blues and psychedelia. He goes on to say, Gypsy Eyes is based on a standard, ancient blues field holler, with Jimi Hendrix creating some great synergy between his vocal and the lead guitar riff. In fact, the song is loaded with a collection of riffs, and Hendrix neatly compiles them together in one song. Utilizing the recording studio as an instrument, Hendrix's overdubbing technique reaches an early peak here, as the multiple guitar parts swirl around each other in spectacular fashion. In addition, the flanging phasing effects are also a part of the arrangement, and by proxy the song itself. Richard Middleton notes that licks in rock music are often used through a formula and variations technique, and that Gypsy Eyes is put together from variants of 5 stock ideas, familiar from other recordings in the same style. Drum lick A, drum lick B, a complex of riffs on guitar and bass guitar, a basic melodic falling pattern using the notes of the pentatonic scale, a characteristic guitar effect, the attacked single note with long decay and glissando fall. He concludes that the combination and variations of these formulae are many and highly imaginative, but the basic formulae are so simple that the recording could well have been worked out in performance. On the same day, the Jimi Hendrix Experience is featured in the following music magazine, Go Set, which featured a review of Up From the Skies. Friday, the 26th of April, and the Jimi Hendrix Experience is featured in the following music magazines and newspapers, The East Village Other, and The Great Speckled Bird. While Saturday, the 27th of April, saw the Jimi Hendrix Experience featured in Disc Music Echo, and Record Mirror in a piece titled, Says Mitch Mitchell. For the remainder of the month, the Jimi Hendrix Experience record at the Record Plant, working primarily on the songs Gypsy Eyes and Little Miss Strange. In relation to this period, Chas Chandler told author John McDermott, I would go in there to the Record Plant and wait for Jimmy, and he would show up with 8 or 9 hangers-on. When he finally did begin recording, Jimmy would be playing for the benefit of his guests, not the machines. We'd be going over a number again and again, and I would say over the talkback, that was it, we got it. He would say, no, 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 and would record another and another and another. Finally, I just threw my hands up and left. Chandler, who far preferred the hit-it-and-quit-it method of record-making, grew increasingly frustrated with Hendrix's perfectionist tendencies, as exemplified by the 4 dozen takes he required for the funky field holler Gypsy Eyes, and the party atmosphere that dominated many of the Record Plant sessions. While in relation to the band's financial matters, Noel had this to say. The Experience had a nice financial exterior, but the gloss disguised a major mess. My circles of acquaintances included plenty of lawyers and accountants, but they were weekend hippies in wigs, swingers in false moustaches and carefully pressed bell-bottoms, groovy guys looking for a bit of free love. My accountant looked around and returned to report that he could not find any contracts which I had signed. He couldn't even trace the companies which I had signed contracts. As far as anyone could tell, I had not signed any contracts at all. Jimmy must have known more about what was going on than he let on, and I know he was worried about coming out of the Experience broke, but like me was put off by the business world. Keeping the group going was work enough without the added burden of taking care of business. We pursued our own private, misguided strategies, signing contracts outside of the presence of others, figuring everyone was getting the same bits of paper to sign. Noel makes one last startling revelation, stating that one night in a back room at the scene, we were offered $1 million each to sign with a prominent, allegedly mob-orientated organization. That concludes this installment of the series. Stay tuned for the next episode, where we will begin the deep dive into May of 1968 of the Hendrix story, including the Fillmore East and Miami Pop Festival, along with more about the recording of their 3rd album, Electric Ladyland. Don't forget to subscribe for future content updates. And by the way, if you have any stories or anecdotes to contribute, we would love to hear from you.